This video will be speaking to the actual time mechanics branch or facet of what has now become principal dynamics. This particular consideration is the origin of our entire study into this field, and it concerns the understanding of how placebos function. Now, in many case studies, you can get, controlled case studies, you can give one control group a certain experimental medication, designed, at least designed to, as intended to be, cure a certain illness or to take care of a certain problem. And you can give another control group the proverbial sugar pill, nothing, give them just something that they think is a medication. And of course, depending on the subject's frame of reference, depending on their mindset, their mentality, depending on their attitude, but mainly depending on their expectations, this placebo can have profound effects. In fact, placebos have been known to cure cancers. Even the placebo effect and the nocebo effect have been known to have amazing, astounding effects on people, depending on their personality, really, depending on the values that they have in play. And so while principal dynamics ultimately would be oriented toward, you know, maintaining or controlling your own value system, manipulating your own value system for the intent with the intention of, you know, designing yourself in a more intentional and decided way, eliminating autonomic factors and things that have been programmed into you via society or public education, eliminating negative elements and reconfiguring so as to provide more positive elements to your mentality, design yourself the way that you wish to, and to reconcile difficulties in the body and in the personal value, the body of the value system, the phantom body, as it were, and to, reinforce positive elements of the personality. Time mechanics, as we've known it, is a specific branch of this dedicated solely to the health and the benefit of someone's health. Now, placebo effects have been known to have even more profound effects than the medications itself. Even in the medications of failure, that placebo pill can heal somebody's illnesses depending on the values that they have in play. As I've said, the person would have to negotiate their own value system in such a way as to make it more feasible, more accepting of this particular facet. But the body is designed to maintain itself indefinitely. It can heal just about any illness. It can take care of any problem that originates in the body. The body is equipped to take care of it. It should be common sense, really, that if something can happen to the body, illness wise, virally or what have you, then the body is obviously, it should be designed to handle its own problems. If there's a problem that arises in the system itself should know how to take care of it. Certain cases, obviously, there would be, certain diseases that may be, certain bacterias and the kind of, the kind of bacterias or viruses that gain a certain ground on our antibiotics, antibiotic resistant strains of certain diseases. That could be a problem, of course. And then there are certain diseases that are new to the body and it hasn't developed immunities to it. But for the most part, anything that we're going to come across in daily life, most people, the body is equipped to handle whatever problems come up. And yes, even cancers, even AIDS, all the uncurable diseases, the body can heal it. There are values in play that configure the way your mind operates, your psyche, and your brain controls your physiology. So, pretty much what you communicate to yourself. If you tell yourself something's not possible, you can't cure it, then that's the decision you've made as to how your body's capable of functioning. So you have to orient your values in a certain way to make things feasible, acceptable, possible. That would be the overall scheme of principle dynamics. But as I said, time mechanics is devoted specifically to this healing factor, and it's designed to mimic what we know of magics, of shamanism and such, and what you might call witchcraft, spellcasting. The manner by which spellcasting operates is that people perform certain rituals, certain ceremonial configurations of actions and thoughts and feelings. They configure their mind, body, and spirit in such a way via ritual, via ceremony, so as to convince their brain to activate a certain function. They uh, negotiate their mindset, their value system via ceremonial ritual in such a way as to trick their brain into, creating a certain circumstance. And the more that they're used, the more that these ceremonies and rituals, these routines are played out in the environment, in the social environment, the more feasible they become, the more easily accessible these routines will be to trigger certain factors of the brain, of the psychology. So, like a glyph, for example, or a rune or something that's known all over the world to mean a certain something, your brain is going to know what that means because we do, in fact, share a global consciousness. So, somewhere in the collective unconscious, that information is readily available. And it will, seeing that certain glyph, that image, will trigger that effect in the brain, that response. It will trigger a response in the brain that will configure your chemistry in such a way as to create an emotional response. And you line up your thoughts, feelings, and biology, and you have the resulting effect. Now, we don't encourage this spell casting or soul casting, as it were, because it's like it's too effective. Actually, people who don't believe in that, it's because you haven't encountered it. You haven't seen, a real practitioner put it into play. It's very real. And, voodoo and such things that people consider to be total bullshit, you haven't seen it happen. And you've been convinced by society to treat it as though it's ridiculous because they don't want you to understand what you're capable of doing. The people that are in charge want you to be docile. They want you to be, you know, apathetic. They don't want you to realize that you're capable of making dramatic changes in your life via your own personality. They don't want you to know the power that you have, the Kamui, the power of heaven, that you in fact are. So most people have been totally convinced to treat things like this as though it's ridiculous nonsense. And then, the more ridiculous and nonsensical it becomes in society, the less you're going to see it happen. The less you see it happen, the less feasible it is. And we effectively destroy people's ability to manipulate, matter and mentality in this way. But it still exists, and there are many people who can do it, and we have worked with many casters. I've performed castings on my own. Every one of our operators has done it at some point, and they know that is real deal Holyfield. But as I was saying, it's almost like it's too effective, and it can have lasting effects upon the physiology and mentality of the operative in play. So we try to we absolutely do not encourage it. We actually try to move away from it by having adopted our own methods that we call spot casting, which is just, this is glyph work, this is imagery, this is simple on the spot tactics that can be used to sway values in a certain direction and to create primers and cues on the spot for other people and even for yourself. We use spot casting more on ourselves than others. Obviously, mind control, our own control of our own mind is what we train people, what we're trying to get across is control of your own personality and your own informative attitude. But via communications, you can, simple communications with hypnotic elements in play, you can hypnotize people on the spot. And that also is very true. It's very real. And it's not any kind of weird sci-fi out there sort of like magical sort of thing. It's not supernatural. It's just acting on the principles that are already in play. People's value systems, the way that your chemistry works, the way that your brain reacts to things. It's simply using that to your advantage. Our original concept here, our original concept design was initially dedicated to using via the realm of association, creating associations between senses and reaction. Because your senses, your five known senses, your five most prominent senses is sight, scent, touch, taste, sound. These can be very effective triggering mechanisms, and we notice this like if you smell something or you hear a certain song play or you smell a certain scent and it drags you back to a certain time, effectively time travel. Really, you feel as though you go back to this time that you were in. You even have the same mindset and you have the same kind of uh, cognition. Like you actually for a moment you'll feel as though you've been taken back to another time via these strong sensory perceptions. And what happens there is your brain will react with the same physiology, the same physiological response. The brain will produce a physiological response that lines up with the time that you've been taken to. And that we think of times as configurations of values. A configuration of values in play will cause you, to feel healthy, to feel abundant, to feel in a good mood, to be, impress upon yourself a measure of greatness and excellence, and you feel good about things. Your brain is working properly, everything's working properly, your body's in good condition. And the values that are configured in that instance be considered a time, and each time can be isolated. And so what we try to do here is to isolate a time and associate it to the presence of a certain sensation. The focus on one sensation. This is going to be a meditative practice. Really doing this, we'll make a proposition video as to how to go about doing this. There are two primary measures by which to make this happen. That's going to be conditioning, which takes a long time, a lot of effort, routine, discipline, and trauma, which we'll get into why trauma works and how it works. But anybody who's experienced anything similar to PTSD can understand how trauma can be, and anybody who's maybe been traumatized as a child or been victimized, they know how effective trauma can be at isolating a time and causing for you to remain there. So using time mechanics, what we want to do is break people out of the times that make them feel depressed and down and unable, disabled. And we want to use a certain sense that we can attach to a configuration of values to bring them into a good time. So we want to isolate a time where you feel good, where you're healthy, you're abundant, you have this, you have a positive attitude and a positive general well-being about you. And we want to attach a certain sense to that, which can be a color scheme. It could be, a scent, some kind of a scent. I carry a chapstick around with me and I smell that. I don't have, of course, I don't have it on me now, but I carry a chapstick around with me and I smell that when I feel really good. And via conditioning, after I've done that for so long now, that if I start to feel bad, if I start to feel kind of down, depressed, beaten up, or even sickly, I can take that chapstick and I can smell it. And it has to be a unique scent, obviously, because you don't want it popping up all over the place. That would fuck it up. It has to be a very unique, particular scent that you can just use when you feel good. And then when you feel bad, smelling that will bring you back to the time where you feel good. And it will adjust your values in such a way as to make you feel, optimal. And as I said, in the instance of sickness or illness, this will cause for your brain to create a physiological response in the body, upon your overall well-being, so as to actually heal you. It will perform the processes necessary to maintain your body because it feels optimal. It feels maintained. Your brain goes back to the time where you are okay and everything's fine, and it treats your body as such. And so your body will eliminate illnesses because they're not a factor, really. It's not, you've been brought to a time where illness is not a factor. The body has no problem. And dealing with this, the primary element is going to be separation anxiety. Is going to be a primary difficulty in this. Obviously, separation anxiety and cognitive dissonance are the two things that pull this down, that weigh this practice down. But speaking to separation anxiety, it's pretty much that you need to know how to calm yourself. You need to know how to keep yourself from panicking. If you panic in a situation, your body goes into emergency mode. You're going to be at you're going to be at a loss. You're going to have the lower hand in the situation, but you can train yourself to disrupt that. Use a scratch maneuver, disrupt it, and maintain a calm attitude. Don't panic. Don't allow for yourself to panic or go into emergency mode. And this will save your life, believe me. There are various instances where my roommate and I were just talking about a man drowning in a river because of hypothermia, because of how cold it was. That person has a certain amount of time to get out before hypothermia sets in. But that time is designated, in fact, by whether or not they panic in the situation. If you can remain calm and keep your body and your brain calm, it will regulate your temperature in such a way as to maintain a proper temperature for a longer amount of time. The same thing happens with pain when you get hurt. I've burnt myself several times. I've even grabbed a hot pan out of the oven with my hand, and seriously put damage to my hand via it. But I've put myself in a mindset where I looked at my hand and I said, it's not an emergency. Don't panic, and calm myself down. And damage didn't occur. The hand healed itself faster, and it prevented the blisters from breaking out and shit. It seriously just healed itself in front of me because I told my brain and my body to calm down, to keep regulated, to not panic. And this is very true. It's very effective, and it can work for you too. So we'll make the proposition video as to exercises as to how to do that, on exercises as to how to do that, but that's the primary idea behind time mechanics. That was the original idea we had, essentially, was practical time travel, so to speak. So using senses, attaching senses. Scent is going to be the most powerful sense in that regard. That we found through our experimentation. We found that scent is the most powerful sense to use, but basically attaching a sensation to a time and associating them so that those neurons fire in the brain, and also using that associative practice and patterning to sidestep or to hack through, essentially, problems in the brain where you have attachments that are traumatic, that are negative. We want to create associations that will allow for your brain to fire around those and no longer utilize those, so that they will eventually just quit and be out of the way. So reprogramming the brain in that way, that's what we're doing. It's an effective measure by which to program the brain in such a way as to maintain your own health and positive attitude. So that is speaking to time mechanics. Thank you very much for your time. Love you guys. Kila Salai, Terry Uni, Namaste.